Hey, everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock with you. The podcast you have been waiting since January 5th to hear. The Browns have a new head coach. And I think on January 5th, had we thrown out a bunch of names, I don't know that this would have been at the top of our list. But obviously he came into the process early. And now here on the final day of the process, it's 8 o'clock on January 28th. About 10 hours after the Browns hired Todd Monken as their 19th head coach. So Mary Kay, look, you have been saying over and over again on this pod, you have been tweeting, you have been writing, Todd Monken is still in this. It's like, everybody was talking about Grant Udinski before he dropped out, Nathan Shieldhouse, of course, Jim Schwartz. Would there be some mystery candidate? All of those things. But you did keep coming back to this idea. Todd Monken is still in the running for this job. And here we are right before this, a few days before this search hits a month long. Todd Monken is the head coach. So just what was your initial reaction when this news came out?
I was not surprised. I was just not surprised because I knew that he was right in the thick of it. And I think I had even written in one of my stories that he was, in it right until the end. That was one of my stories over the past couple of days. And about 5 days ago, when everybody was very focused on Udinski and Shieldhouse, I wrote a story saying, hey, wait a minute, pump the brakes here. Todd Monken and Jim Schwartz are still very much in this competition. The thing to remember about Todd Monken, and there are a lot of things that we're going to be getting into here, but he was the first request that they made outside of their building. It was Jim Schwartz and Tommy Rees, their own coordinators. And the very first request they made was for Todd Monken. I think that was significant. And then the very second interview that they did was with Todd Monken after Jim Schwartz, their in-house guy. So he was always very high on their list. He was always in the thick of it. And I believe that he was always going to make it to the very end and be either the head coach or a finalist. And I had started hearing things over the past couple of days. Now, I did think and hear that Jim Schwartz was still very much in it till the end. And so was Nate Shieldhouse. I mean, they really did deliberate on Tuesday. And they did give these guys, like another opportunity on Tuesday to kind of make a little bit of a pitch for themselves. But Todd was always high on their list. And when I look at this situation, my number one takeaway in this whole thing is the fact that we know that they need most of their help on offense. That's what they needed. They're pretty good. They're humming along pretty well on defense. At least they have been for the last couple of years. We'll see what happens now. But they've got their talent on that side of the ball. They've got their future young guys on that side of the ball. They still have Miles. They've still got Denzel. So they're okay on the defensive side of the ball. What they need is to pull that offense forward, to get that quarterback of the future, to get that passing game going, to become explosive, and to be able to compete in the NFL with these amazing offenses that we see in the playoffs right now. And they haven't been able to do that. So all along, I kind of thought it was going to be an offensive guy. Although I never really ruled out Jim Schwartz. But if you're going to attract an offensive guy for this football team, you're not going to get John Harbaugh. Who is going to come here with this quarterback situation and say, yeah, this is the place where I can hang my hat on this, and I'm going to make my career here, and I'm going to go on to a long and storied career with this offensive situation here in Cleveland. There are not that many excellent, top-notch football coaches out there with bright, long futures that were going to take the chance on themselves in this way. Now, Todd Monken, this is a great opportunity for him. He's turning 60 next week. He's never gotten an opportunity to be a head coach before. To him, this is the dream job. It's the dream job. And when you look over all of the people who realistically would have taken this job in this situation at this moment in time, he's by far got the best resume. By far got the best resume. He's an accomplished coordinator, a really accomplished coordinator. And I just think, and this is the other thing that I really want to make this point, and that is, if you if you think that your defensive coordinator is going to bolt the building, and by the time they made this hire, they had to have a pretty good idea that Jim Schwartz was not going to be happy about this, right? So you knew you were taking a risk, and your defensive coordinator was potentially going to leave you. Who did you want holding the bag when that happened? Did you want it to be a guy who has 37 years experience and 11 years in the NFL and has called hundreds and thousands of plays in his career? Or did you want it to be a 35-year-old guy who's been in the NFL for 2 years, has never called a play, has never been a coordinator, brilliant as heck, but has never faced the firing squad, never had players revolt because their defensive coordinator just left the building? Who would you have wanted in this moment of potential crisis and adversity? The experienced guy or the completely raw, new guy that has never had to handle anything like this before in the pros? Not even close. So I just want to make that point. The more I thought about this today, the more I realized, and you don't mess with Todd. I mean, you don't mess with Todd Monken. He was here in 2019. We know what he's like. He's a tough guy. He's tough talking. He's totally himself. He doesn't put up with, anybody's BS. I mean, he just doesn't. I mean, like, he is a no nonsense, old school, grizzled, almost curmudgeon-y guy. But I mean, people really like him too. He's got a good laid back personality, but he's old school. He's old school, and he can handle everything that's about to come his way.
So Ashley, when, obviously to that point, I think one of the things that works against Todd Monken is the fact that he's 59 years old in a lot of fans' eyes, right? And they kind of get enamored with these young guys and these young upcoming guys. And I will say this, like, if you took, I thought about this when I was writing my column today. I actually might have put this in there even. If you took Todd Monken's last 6 years, just that resume from Georgia, so not even going back to Tampa, but just the 3 years at Georgia and then the 3 years in Baltimore, right? So really good coordinator for a really good offense that won 2 national championships, then a really good coordinator for 3 years in the NFL, coached a quarterback to an MVP. One of the years had like the best offense across the board in the entire NFL. And you took those 6 years and gave it to a guy who's like 45 or like 39 or something like that. Browns fans might throw a parade for that resume. Now, that doesn't mean that's not the case, right? They are hiring a guy who is 59 years old, who has not had a head coaching job before, who was not a hot candidate this time around, all of that. But the resume is strong, especially just in the last 6 years, what he's been able to do. And I guess I almost view this as, to Mary Kay's point, like, Todd Monken, this is his opportunity, similar to Jim Schwartz. This was his opportunity. He's probably not going to get many more opportunities after this, if at all. The Browns need a head coach, and there aren't a lot of guys who really want this job. Now, I have some issues with the process and some of the things they maybe didn't do. We can get into that, but that's how I would try to sell this hire. If somebody said to me, sell this hire at the opening press conference, that's what I would say. Maybe I wouldn't tout the like marriage of convenience angle quite as much, but I would say like, hey, this guy does have a pretty impressive resume for an offensive head coach if you're going to hire one.
Yeah, I really just feel like there was this disconnect between like what you were saying at the top there, Dan, that, and this is to be expected, I think, in any coach hiring cycle, that the young, like, question marks get most of the attention on Twitter. But obviously, Twitter is not real life. Like, we can point to these tangible things that we know this interest in Todd Monken was real. And like, for me, why it felt so real was the fact that at any point throughout this process, Todd Monken could have said, you know what? I'm all set. I'm going to go work with my good friend, John Harbaugh, where there is a much clearer cut quarterback situation with the New York Giants and Jackson Dart. John Harbaugh really went to bat for me in Baltimore. I'm going to go do that. But he never did. And the fact that he never did really showed like he thought this chance was very real that we're talking about. And look, I do think, like to your point, I think it's going to be a hard sell to a lot of the fan base. I think it's going to be an idea they're going to have to warm up to. But like, as I sat on it more and talked about it and have thought about it, like I do think Todd Monken could potentially be a guy that Browns fans do warm up to, because Browns fans, I think, tend to gravitate more towards that old school, tough talking mentality. And we know like Todd Monken's whole thing is tough love, but this is not a player's coach. And I do think fans will gravitate towards that part of him. But I'm curious to see how it goes over, how it goes over with players, things like that.
Yeah, and then just I wrote down his rankings earlier, and these are, you guys know I love the yards per play stats, but these are close to the overall stats too. So whichever you kind of choose to use, but specifically in Baltimore, you're looking at fourth, first, and seventh in total yards per play the last 3 years, third, first, and first in rushing yards per play, third, first, and 10th in passing yards per play. And really weirdly, his 3 years in Tampa and 2 of his 3 years in Baltimore, he was top 10. His offenses were top 10 in third down conversions. They were 13th last year. And of course, last year they were dealing with a lot of injuries. Lamar never seemed quite like Lamar after he got hurt initially. And also, like, he's not going to have Lamar Jackson here. He's not going to have Derrick Henry here. So that obviously changes things a little bit. We did see in 2019, however much of a role he played in it and Freddie Kitchen played in it, all of that, he was really good with Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb makes a lot of offensive coordinators look good. A lot of offensive play callers look good, but Nick had one of his best rushing seasons when Monken was here. So again, Mary Kay, the hire itself in a vacuum, I think you could make a legitimate case for this, that you hired a good offensive coach and a guy that by all accounts, Lance Reisland has been tweeting about him all day, but he's been on this podcast before, talking about him in Baltimore previews, how much he likes the way that Todd schemes and attacks matchups and things like that. So just again, at the very least, in a vacuum, as an offensive head coach, this is not a bad pick.
No, it's not a bad pick. I also think that he has been a head coach before, not at a super crazy high level, but he has been in the head chair before. It was at Southern Miss from 2013 to 2015. He turned around a program there, got them into a bowl game after he took over an 0-12 team. So he's been able to do that. So we know he can do that. And then the other thing, and I have to add this to my column that I wrote today because I forgot to stick it in there, is the fact that he knows the AFC North. He knows everything there is to know about the AFC North. He knows how tough it is. He knows the ins and outs of the rivalries. He knows the history. He understands it. He has a familiarity with the whole Cleveland scene. He knows the Cleveland media. When he sits down for his introductory press conference, he's going to be back in the dentist chair that he spent so much time in 2019. He's going to look out there and he's going to see the same sorry faces that were there in 2019 asking him these questions.
Sometimes I feel bad for these guys that come back, because the offensive line coach was here in 2009 to 2013. And it's like,
yes,
hey, everything is exactly the same as when I left it.
Yeah, like, what are you people doing? What are you still doing here? We like it here. Anyways, so he's going to look out. He's going to see a lot of familiar faces there. He obviously knows Jimmy Haslam and JW and D Haslam and people that were here in the front office. There are still plenty of people here, from then. So he has a familiarity with that. And I think he did fly right under the radar because of his age, mostly because of his age. If 10 other teams requested him in this cycle, I think that Browns fans would be like, oh yeah, we're getting this sought after guy. People didn't think about him because people don't really think all that much about a 59-year-old guy who's never been a head coach in the NFL. Now, if you're John Harbaugh or maybe a Mike McCarthy and you've won a Super Bowl and you're in the, upper age bracket, then you're going to get those calls. But this was an opportunity for him to make his mark. And it's an opportunity for the Cleveland Browns to have a really, really good offensive guy who is willing to take a job with a very uncertain quarterback situation. Very uncertain. And I don't know what happened in those rooms, and I don't know what happened in those interviews, but I really hope that he told them that he's going to have control over whatever happens at quarterback, because he will only be as good as the quarterback that he puts out there that starts games for him. And maybe it'll be Shedeur Sanders. People are talking about, and I think I threw it in my column or something. I'm so confused. I don't even know which end is up anymore. But the Ravens wanted to draft Shedeur Sanders, not high, albeit I think it was also the 5th round. And it was right before the Cleveland Browns drafted him.
Yeah, it was like 4 or 5 picks before the Browns? It was right there.
Yes. And so they were willing to do that in the 5th round. And I don't know if Todd Monken had anything to do with that or not, but maybe he did. Maybe he saw something in Shedeur Sanders. Maybe he sees something in Shedeur Sanders now. And maybe he's excited to coach him. We'll find out when we talk to him next week a little bit more about that. But he's also got Deshaun Watson. And this is something that I wrote about, was the fact that he watched Deshaun Watson in Baltimore come out of a locker room on a bum ankle with a fractured shoulder and beat the Ravens on the road. And everyone can say what they will about Deshaun Watson, but if Browns fans got more of that Deshaun Watson, they didn't hate him that day. Most people didn't hate him that day from a football standpoint. Okay, let's just keep it football for right now. Most people liked that football player that day. It's the football player who tried to come back on a surgically repaired shoulder and who wasn't ready and who then suffered an Achilles that people do not like. But Todd Monken, a grizzled veteran coach, he might see something in Deshaun if Deshaun is healthy. We don't know yet. Or he might say, no, go out and get me a veteran. Like, we need to find a veteran. Give me Malik Willis. Give me somebody else. Let's trade for somebody, whoever that would be. Or I don't think there's anybody that they could necessarily get their hands on in the draft unless they traded up significantly. But he's got the authority to choose who that is going to be to some extent. So I think that's good. But I don't think this is as bad as some fans think this hire is at this moment.
Yeah, and I think, just to get into a little bit of that process of it then, and kind of go down this road a little bit. I mean, I would hope that that's the case, right? That he's going to be able to say, this is what I want to do at quarterback. Hey, that he's able to sit down in that room and look at Andrew Berry and say, if this is the case, and I don't know if it is or not, you know what? I don't think Shadeur's a starter in the NFL. So we got to go another direction. Or I don't even want to talk about Deshaun Watson or whatever it is, right? The opposite of what you said. Whatever they decide, I hope that is the process in this whole thing, that he gets to give an honest assessment, good or bad, of what they have in that quarterback room and say, this is what we're going to do. I do think, just looking at this, I think my biggest issue, it's not so much where it landed. It's just sort of how it got here. So just to kind of walk through what I think as I kind of looked at some of these dates. So they talked to Todd Monken for the first time on January 10th. They hired him on January 28th. In between then, they obviously waited out Nate Scheelhaus. They were obviously willing to wait out Nate Scheelhaus all the way until the 26th, right? They talked to Jim Schwartz. It just feels like this process, if it's, you talk to a guy on the 10th, you talk to him on the 20th, you fly all the way to LA to talk to Nate Scheelhaus, you take a day in between where nothing happens, and then you just end up back on Todd Monken. they didn't talk to like Joe Brady. They didn't talk to Brian Dable. They didn't talk to, Davis Webb is out here getting interviews. And I'm not even saying any of these guys are better than Todd Monken. I don't know. And I don't know if any of these guys would have taken that job. And on top of that, there's the whole Jim Schwartz of it, right? Like, are they making candidates say they want to keep Jim Schwartz? Do they, obviously that's what was getting reported over and over again. Like, hey, they want Jim Schwartz to stay in the building. So now it looks really rough when you hire a guy and you didn't anticipate maybe Jim Schwartz saying, nope, I'm out of here because I wanted this job. If they were saying, if they aren't giving the guy autonomy, if that was a roadblock for some candidates, and this is a lot of ifs, but if they weren't giving the candidate autonomy over the quarterback situation and saying, you get to pick the quarterback, you get to dictate the quarterback plan in a big way, I think I'd have an issue with that process. But I think, Ashley, just my biggest issue was they kind of drew this thing out really long. And okay, they ended up on Todd Monken, which is fine. But I guess I just don't trust. This isn't even a shot at Todd Monken because, again, I think the resume is strong enough. I'm not saying he's going to fail, and I'm not sitting here saying he's a bad coach. I think what I'm saying is I just don't trust Andrew Berry and the Haslams that they did this thing right. And maybe they stumbled into a guy in Todd Monken that is going to be awesome. And for Browns fans' sake, I hope that's the case. And I think it's possible because of that resume we talked about already. But I just don't trust these guys to actually pull this off, I guess.
I mean, I don't think many people do. And really, like, this is Andrew's first head coach search as a GM. And like, it could end up being the most important process of, determining his job security and stuff right now, or going forward in the future, I should say. So that part of it is interesting. Like, the Nate Shieldhouse of it all is really interesting because I think where I don't have as much of an issue with the process is if they really, really liked him. He is a candidate that there's a lot of questions about, right? Because as Mary Kay said, like, he's only been in the NFL 2 years. He's never called a play. He's never been a coordinator. But what Nate Shieldhouse did have is that Sean McVay drawer of plays role, which a lot of guys have had that role and have gone on to be head coaches. Zach Taylor, Liam Cohen, like, that role is kind of a prized role if you are an up and coming coach in the NFL. And if they really liked him, if they were balking at the lack of experience, like, and they wanted to keep going through this process, in some ways they were just victims of circumstance in terms of the Rams were pretty good and made it to the NFC title game and they had to wait. So if that process, if that's truly how it went, and at the end of it all, they said, you know what, we're not there with Shieldhouse. No one else really is. We'll see what happens with him. But we still really like Todd Monken, who was our first guy. Then great. Like, you went through your process, and for better or worse, I think that's what they needed to do. And I think, like, if there was some way that wires got crossed between them and Jim Schwartz, and they really didn't know that this was going to be his reaction, what has been reported today, then that to me is almost the bigger issue with the process, because you have so angered the one coach in your building that you talked about wanting to keep that the end result could potentially be him leaving in a very explosive fashion now. So that, I think, is where my biggest issue with the process would be, if that's fair to say.
Okay, so let's talk about the Jim Schwartz of it all. I think that's the other thing people want to talk about. And I guess my bigger point is, like, if you really loved Monken that much, and like I said, you got to him so early in the process, I don't know. Was it worth it to wait out Nate Shieldhouse that long? And now you've kind of lost time in sort of building this staff out, building everything out that Todd is going to need to build out. And obviously he's already started on that. He's got an aligned coach. He's requested interviews with people. So it's beginning, but I do feel like maybe they might've missed out on some people in the process, whatever. The Jim Schwartz side of this, Mary Kay, I'm not surprised if Jim is actually, like, upset that he thought he was going to get this job and he got passed over and he doesn't want to work here anymore. I get that. Now he is under contract. We'll see how this all shakes out. But I guess what is your read on sort of how the Browns kind of talked about Jim Schwartz in interviews, kind of what they were telling candidates about Jim Schwartz, and kind of where we are now with Jim Schwartz?
I don't know what the messaging was, but here's what the messaging should have been. And I don't know if the signals got crossed or what. But in the very early part of the process, they should have probably said to Jim Schwartz, look, we love our defense. We love you as our defensive coordinator. And we really don't necessarily want to mess with a good thing. We want to give you an interview because we respect you that much and because we think that you have the potential to be a head coach. But what we're really trying to accomplish here is to fix the other side of the ball. And therefore, we are leaning heavily towards an offensive coach. And we're going to try to find the best offensive head coach that we can possibly find. But we want you to stay. We absolutely want you to stay. We'll sweeten the pot. We'll extend your contract. We'll kick in some money. I was going to tweet earlier today that Jimmy was going to have to give Jim Schwartz $230 million fully guaranteed. But
Give,
we'll
give him a
sweeten
give him a storefront in Brook Park too. Just whatever he wants to put there.
But that should have been, in my mind, that should have been the messaging. This is what we have to do. We've got to get our offense up to speed. We have to pull it forward. We have to make it so that it can match the intensity and the elite level of your championship caliber defense. In order to do that, we have to go find the best offensive guy we can find. So hang in there with us, please. We need you as coordinator. Now, if you have a chance to go interview for a head coach job somewhere else, we cannot stop you from doing that. But our job is probably going to go to an offensive guy, and we don't want you to leave. That messaging may have been different, may have had a different outcome. Maybe they said those exact words to him in that exact way. I don't know what they said, but he thought he was getting this job. He really felt that he had an amazing chance to get this job, from what I understand. And he was excited about it, and he's upset, and anybody would be. And I guess that you would maybe think that you had to, maybe they thought he was going to be the head coach. I don't know. I don't know what the messaging was. It's unfortunate that this might have the ending of Jim Schwartz not being here anymore. It's really unfortunate because everyone knows how important he is to this team, to this defense, how much the players like him. And here's my feeling on it too. That ship probably has already sailed. But I've also seen stranger things happen, right? If I were Todd Monken, I would reach out, let things settle down for a day or two. Reach out to Jim Schwartz and bring him in or meet somewhere for dinner and have a conversation with him and tell him how much you want him to be your defensive coordinator and how well you guys think that you would work together and whatever the case may be. I know that Todd Monken has been open to keeping Jim Schwartz, and I've been writing that. So those two guys, if Jim is open to it, they need to have a convo and they need to figure out if it's a fit and they can possibly work together. Now, again, that ship has probably sailed. Jim's probably going to go take a job in San Francisco or somewhere else. But there is a world in which maybe, just maybe, when things cool down a little bit, that he would stay. If not, and I want to make this point, and I want to emphasize this, Todd Monken knows what a good defense looks like. He knows what a good defense. He worked with Mike McDonald. Okay? It's not like he's never brushed shoulders with a good defensive coordinator in his career. He knows what one is. Mike McDonald is one of the best in the NFL, now the head coach of the Seahawks. There's like spin-off defensive coordinators coming from Mike McDonald, like Jesse Minter, right? So Todd knows what a good defense is all about. And he's been in coaching for 37 years. And if he needs to find another defensive coordinator, I think he's going to be able to find a good defensive coordinator. And they'll help him too. Andrew has connections. I'm sure Jimmy has connections. People in the building have connections. George Warhop has connections, the new offensive line coach. who was here from 2009 to 2013. So I think if it comes to that, I think he's going to be able to find a really good defensive coordinator.
This is totally random and unrelated. We'll get back to the Schwartz topic. But another name that they didn't interview, by the way, and this is a guy that Browns fans can't laugh at anymore. They didn't talk to Mike McCarthy. Like, I don't know, maybe he was just going to go to Pittsburgh regardless. But right, if you're going to go down this road, isn't that a guy you should have talked to at some point in these 20 days in that process? Yeah, go ahead, Mary Kay.
Let me just make a real super quick point about that. I think when we get really puzzled about why they didn't talk to some of these guys.
Maybe they didn't want to talk to the Browns.
Exactly. And why wouldn't they? Look at the quarterback situation.
That is true. And Mike McCarthy's the one guy who might really be interested in working with Aaron Rodgers again, too. Like one of those guys. So that's fair. That's fair in all of this as well. So Ashley, when we talk about Schwartz, and I'm thinking back to when the Browns hired Kevin Stefanski and that coaching search, they gave Greg Williams an interview at the very beginning, right? I think it was their first interview. So he had been the interim coach, and they kind of gave him we'll interview you, like the token, of course, you've been here, you are interim, you did a good job for us, we'll interview you. And then it kind of moved on from there. And so it feels to me like as soon as Jim Schwartz became a legitimate candidate, so like maybe, I don't know where he was in the hierarchy when they first started this thing. And maybe they went into that first interview and they were like, okay, we don't know if he'll be a real candidate or not, but it went well enough to get a second interview. So I think once it gets to that second interview, organizationally, you have to brace yourself for this idea that we're going to be in this awkward position where we have to tell this guy, you're not getting the job, but we'd sure like you to hang around for another season and work for the guy who did get the job. Probably easier to swallow when that guy is Todd Monken, you would think, as opposed to like a 35-year-old or a 30-year-old. But obviously with Jim, at least at the moment, that's not something he's interested in doing. I'm kind of with Mary Kay. I'd sleep on it. Everybody should sleep on it a little bit. And I don't know that it's going to get better. I don't know that Jim's going to come back, but everybody sleep on it before you panic. But I do think if the Browns if they got sideswiped by this, if they didn't see this coming, like this is just the politics of football. This is the politics of sports. And Jim really wanted this job. And if he had convinced himself he was going to get it, and all of a sudden he doesn't, there's going to be hard feelings. So they probably should have been ready for something like this.
Yeah, and the more I thought about it today, because like I was thinking that too, like wouldn't this sort of reaction for him have been more likely if they had hired one of those young guys, and then he looks at it as I'm doing my job and now I'm essentially also being asked to play a form of babysitter. But I could see a world in which being passed over for Todd Monken is maybe just as insulting to him, because like to our earlier points, like these are both guys looking for a chance. Like Jim is looking for his second chance. He hasn't gotten that since 2013. And Todd Monken is looking for his first chance. Both longtime coordinators, both very successful coordinators. And even though the defense is not the problem right now with this football team and the offense needs fixing, like I can see a world in which Jim Schwartz, who is, a prideful guy, would be very upset still by being passed over for somebody who is more on an even playing field. I mean, they're the exact same age. They're both 59. So I can see that happening. And I do think if the wires got crossed and this was a messaging thing, that is a big mishap on the part of the Browns. And the reality for them is, even if it wasn't, because you're the Cleveland Browns, because of your track record, people on the outside aren't going to give you that grace. And kind of to go back what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, like now you have to wonder what the ripple effects of this are going to be in the locker room if Jim does leave. And I think people are underestimating how these guys feel about this defense and Jim. And I think it's important, like those two things coexist to me. It's not just that they love Jim Schwartz, and they do. They love this defensive system. This system is what is going to get Myles Garrett his second NFL Defensive Player of the Year award. And, I've seen people say, well, anyone can win with Myles and Denzel and Grant, right? Well, They didn't have the best defense when Joe Woods was here. Like in different systems, it might not look the exact same. It is not a given. So I'm curious, and I do think in that way, Todd Monken is the best sort of guy to handle any fallout from that. And it would be a lot. It would be it would be a baptism by fire for a first time head coach if it comes to that. And if it gets really ugly with the Jim Schwartz exit, that's a lot to ask a Grant Udinski or a Nate Shieldhouse to have to deal with.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to your earlier point, Mary Kay. We've talked about like the job of the head coach is to put out fires more than anything, right? And Mike Pettin made an appearance recently where, he was talking about like when you're the head coach, you don't coach anymore. Like that's everybody else. You're putting out fires and you're managing the team. And this becomes the first fire he has to put out because what makes this so difficult is all these Browns players are watching this unfold from who knows where right now, right? Like who knows where Myles Garrett is right now? He's somewhere with Chloe Kim or something getting ready for the Olympics, right? And who knows, Grant Delpit might be out traveling the world for all we know. Like who knows where all these guys are scattered all over the place. Some of them are still around, some of them are again in all parts of the world at this point. So all of these guys are kind of consuming a lot of this the same way we are. They're seeing it on Twitter. They're seeing it on Instagram. They're wherever they're getting this news from, they're kind of consuming it the same way we are. And so this becomes a challenge for a guy like Todd Monken, because obviously I'm sure his first order of business is going to be to reach out to a lot of the key players and a lot of the star players, make contact with them. He's got to find a defensive coordinator if Jim is going to leave. But I could imagine that some of these Browns players, wherever they are right now, are sitting there scrolling their phone like, wait a minute, what's going on right now? And like, you can put out the fires, but this just presents that first big challenge for Todd Monken, however this plays out with Jim Schwartz.
Yes, this is definitely the first adversity that is hitting him, and it's coming at him fast and furious. But I don't think he's going to flinch. I think he's kind of built for this sort of thing and that he will be able to handle it. And once again, I think that this was part of the equation. When they looked at it and they realized that they were probably going to lose their defensive coordinator that all their players love so much, who was going to be able to stand tall in the face of that crisis and handle all of the insanity that potentially could come with it. Now, if he goes out and hires a really good, accomplished defensive coordinator, the next up and coming guy, then I think those guys will be okay. What they want is someone that is going to bring out the best in them. That's why Myles loved playing for Jim Schwartz. He got him, as Ashley just mentioned, 2 NFL Defensive Player of the Year awards. Jim knew exactly where his bread was buttered. He knew what to do with Myles. He knew that he needed to make sure that he was maximizing Myles's talents and abilities. And he's made him a boatload of money, and he's made him a Hall of Famer. He made him a Hall of Famer. Myles even said that he did not have enough Hall of Fame credentials several years ago. But in the Jim Schwartz era, he became a Hall of Famer. Who doesn't love that about their defensive coordinator, right? And it's like that with other guys too. He turned Malik Collins into a Pro Bowl player, basically. He was a Pro Bowl defensive tackle this year. So Jim knows how to do that, especially with those defensive linemen. So we'll have to see how this goes moving forward. The dynamics will change, and potentially the defensive philosophy could change. If you go with one of those Vic Fangio 3-4 defenses, then things are going to change. Things are going to change. And we don't know the fallout from this yet. We could do an entire podcast just on that alone, because it is pretty big. It's a pretty big deal. And what else do we know? Myles Garrett was already talking about at the end of the season, if this is a rebuild, I don't know if I want any part of that, right? He was letting that cat out of the bag a little bit. So now we have to see what he's going to think about this, how he reacts to this. He's taken it upon himself to be a leader, not just of the players, but of the organization. And if he doesn't like something, then he is going to voice his opinion for the most part. So we have to see how that's all going to go. We don't know where that's going yet. But once again, who was going to be able to handle that better? Todd Monken or Nate Shieldhouse? Who's going to stand up to some of these veteran, longtime players? A guy who's been in the NFL for 2 years? A guy who's been around for 37 years and doesn't take any crap from anybody?
Todd might still have Myles Garrett's number. Who knows? He might still have it sitting in his phone right now.
Exactly. And once again, I mean, Todd is actually a likable coach. I mean, players do like Todd Monken. He's got a really good personality, and players like him. I mean, Odell and Jarvis and those guys, they liked him. They tried to get him to try to pull the dysfunctional offense back together. They went to him to say, can you hold a meeting for us? Will you do something? And he did that for them. Didn't work because it was so crazy that year. But he's been through craziness before. I mean, if you can survive the Freddie Kitchens year, I'm telling you what.
We have a photo. I saw it today when I was looking for Todd Monken photos. We have a photo from one of our photogs. It was from the game they played in Arizona, which actually was like the nail in the coffin for Freddie Kitchens. I just remember that locker room after the game. It was like, yep, this is over. This is one and done. We're good here. And there's a picture of Todd Monken behind Freddie Kitchens, and Freddie Kitchens is standing in front of him, putting on his receiver gloves, because the head coach of the football team wore receiver gloves before every single football game. And it was the weirdest thing. And it's just, to me, like, look, a million weirder things than that happened in that 2019 season. But it just struck me as like, yeah, this was 2019 right here in a nutshell.
And Todd Monken, he just handled it. He dealt with it. And he was funny about some of it. You know, he would sit up there and try to explain some of the craziness that would have happened in the previous game offensively. And he didn't have any answers, but he went along with, his philosophy was, I'm here to do whatever Freddie tells me to do. And he just put his head down and he did his job. But hey, Lamar Jackson is not, from everything I hear, the easiest guy to work with necessarily either. And I think those guys kind of butted heads a little bit last year, or at least from the outside looking in, there was some disconnect there a little bit. And Todd, after the season, said that he needed to have coached up Lamar Jackson better. But I don't know. He's been through a lot. He's seen everything. He's been through a lot. And I think he's built for the madness that is about to hit him, because first-time head coaches, most of the time, they don't know what they're in for. They do not know what they're in for. Todd knows what he's in for.
Yeah, and like, I don't think it's a bad thing if a coach and a quarterback butt heads a little bit. I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, Bill Belichick and Tom Brady didn't always have they would butt heads. Like, we've heard some stories after that, and Tom always loved being coached hard. There's stories out there about how mean Peyton Manning would be to people in the building. Sometimes not like in a bad, but just like, he'd push people, right? He'd push his teammates. He'd push his, in that way. Like, that's how you're successful in the NFL sometimes. So I don't have a problem if a guy comes in and rubs people the wrong way. And, if that's the way that he can get to people and get them to be their best, like, that's the job. Ashley, Mary Kay mentioned that rebuild word that Myles Garrett said he didn't want to be a part of. I find it very interesting how Andrew Berry has talked about this roster since after they fired Kevin Stefanski. And he did actually use that word in his press conference the day they fired Kevin. And then today he's talking about the life cycle of this roster. And it was just such an Andrew Berry quote. And it just feels to me like Andrew in some ways is acknowledging that they're going to add a bunch of young guys on offense. When you add a bunch of young guys, it's not always going to go great. Like, it's going to be tough. And that doesn't mean you're going to go 2-15 or 3-14 or anything, but it means that there might be some challenges, and maybe you're not going to go 12-5 next year. I just that's the one other piece of this that I'm a little torn on, because it feels like this would be, in some ways, maybe this would be where you'd want to bring on a young guy who might need to learn a little bit on the job. In other ways, Todd Monken knows how to deal with young guys. He's been a college coach forever. So maybe in that way, he's kind of built for this too. But I think that's the one other disconnect I have here is, if you kind of know this roster might be, let's say, 2 seasons away, you're hiring a 59-year-old coach. Like, look, Andy Reid is 67. So Todd Monken can probably give you, a good 10, 11 years. Like, it happens in the NFL. But I think that's the other disconnect that I think fans are maybe having here too. A young roster with an older coach.
Yeah, I think so. And look, like, I don't know, and I know you guys probably feel the same way on this. I know you both do. Like, the age thing, I think is unfair for many ways.
Yeah,
like,
I do.
I
do.
Right. I know you wrote that today, Dan. Like, I think from a fan's perspective, like, I would encourage fans to think about it differently. I thought it was unfair when people were doing the same thing to Jim Schwartz, and we've talked about that on this podcast as well. Like, I think there is a value sometimes to going that route, but I mean, to your point about the rebuild thing, the life cycle of this roster quote, he's now used 2 times. He also used that quote the day Kevin got fired. And I went back to look at what he said about rebuilding, and on January 5th, whatever day it was that we talked to him, the day Kevin got fired, and how Andrew Barry talks about it. Like, he said, when most people hear the term rebuild, that really their thought is tear down. The idea that you're trading away a number of prime players or veterans and you're accumulating resources and things of that nature. When we think about where we are in transition, it is really about building up the offense. So, like, he's basically saying, no, like, yes, rebuild, but you all have been working with the wrong definition of the rebuild. And he just now has multiple times said, we need to use our resources to beef up that side of the ball, which is why it ultimately, like, makes sense that they went that route when they went with their head coach, number one. And number two, like, again, if you're making the argument for Todd Monken, he's a guy who's seen everything. He's a guy who very recently worked in college and had a lot of success there and knows how to deal with those younger players. And I think all of that is notable. So, like, hey, if you thought he's the right guy to use the Andrew Barryism, the life cycle of your roster, I can see how they talk themselves into that part of it too.
Yeah, and I just, I agree. The age thing is, like, it's a fallback, but it's not a deal breaker for me. If he were 70, I think we've seen, like, okay, Pete Carroll. We thought Pete Carroll would go into Vegas, and Pete Carroll always felt like he was so young and he would just energize that thing and change everything there. Maybe that was pushing it a little bit, right? Todd Monken is not 70 years old. He's 59. Again, Andy Reid is 67. So, he's still going. He's still got some energy. Maybe he's reaching the end, but, he's still going strong. So I don't think the age is as much of a factor. But again, like you were saying, Ashley, people fall in love with the young guys, right? They all want the next Sean McVay, right? Of course, I get it. They all want the next Mike McDonald. They want these young guys who are going to be here for 20 years and be successful. But maybe the reality of it is those guys just weren't ready. And this is the guy who was there. And so maybe, Mary Kay, I think just when I tweeted out my column today, because the feeling I had when this hire happened was, okay. Like, I wasn't super excited. I honestly wasn't like, man, that's a terrible hire. It was just kind of, okay, Todd Monken's the head coach. And I think that's probably fine. Like, because all that matters is, what is this thing going to look like on Sundays? And if they win games on Sundays, then nobody cares how it felt on January 28th. So I guess that's kind of, listen to this podcast between now and when the games start, and listen to us talk about Todd Monken between now and when the games start. But, like, when the games start, if this offense looks better and they're winning games, how we felt on January 28th doesn't really matter.
That's right. And I keep thinking that, okay, well, let's see. If Todd Monken were coaching Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, if you plugged him in Cincinnati and gave him Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Yasi Vash, I think I said that right. If you gave him those guys, then I think he would be a winning head coach. If you gave him Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and that supporting cast, I think he would be a winning head coach. I think, and I know, that that's what has to happen here in Cleveland. They have to rebuild their offense and they have to find their quarterback. It's not a good year to be trying to find a quarterback, either in the draft or in free agency. Maybe there's some surprise quarterback out there somewhere, but you might just have to hope that you can develop or continue to develop Shedeur Sanders into a quality starter, or you might have to hope that Deshaun Watson is that guy that Browns fans saw come out of that locker room and win that football game for them. Because I don't know if any other quarterback is coming riding in on a horse. But the other thing that this team has got to do, they have got to find 3 really tremendous, amazing pass catchers. Amazing. The guys that we watched throughout these playoffs just make those impossible catches. You have to find some guys like that. It needs an overhaul. It needs an overhaul. And hopefully, because Todd's been on offense for so long, his whole career, his whole entire life, and played quarterback in college and those kinds of things, hopefully he will be able to say to them, here's what I need to get the job done, and you have to give it to me. And I get the sense that he told them in all of these interviews the truth about how he feels about everything. I think he told it exactly like it was. And I think they probably appreciated that about him because they need that kind of help. They need a new pair of fresh eyes on this offense. They need somebody to tell them, look, this isn't going to cut it. Now, they've got some good young pieces, of course, in Harold Fannin and Quinshawn and Dylan, but they need a lot of help over there. They need a lot of help over there, and they have to completely rebuild their offensive line. And people have done that in 1 year, but there will be some growing pains. There will definitely be some growing pains. So that's going to be the whole key for him is to rebuild the offensive side of the ball in the way the Browns have rebuilt the defensive side of the ball, and to figure out who the heck the quarterback is going to be.
It's funny, as you were saying that sentence, the Browns need to go find 3 really good. Like, I kind of feel like I knew where you were going with that, but also in my mind, I'm like, there's like 4 positions that she could say here, and it would be like, yes, you're right. Offensive line was one of those positions too. I was texting with Tim and Lance last week about a mock draft that came out, and I joked that somebody could write a pretty convincing column that maybe they should just take all offensive linemen in this draft and just rebuild that whole line. I don't know that that's what I would do specifically, but there's a lot that they need to do. You know, we saw the Bears remake their O-line. They spent a ton of money to remake that O-line. Obviously, they decided not to spend much money on the defensive side of the ball. You know, I don't know that the Browns have, you know, they're going to have some money to spend. And of course they have all those picks. But that's really what it comes down to, is they're going to have to supply Todd Monken and this offense with the tools, because, you know, this is the NFL. Like, you got to have the pieces. You can't just, you know, every team is good. Even the bad teams are good. So you got to have talent to go out there and do what you want to do. And that's the one thing that gives me pause in this whole thing, Ashley, that isn't Todd Monken's fault. If Andrew Berry can't replicate what he did in last year's draft on the offensive side of the ball, and they can't fix this offensive line, and some of these young guys don't develop like they hope they do, that's how we end up right back here next year. And again, I don't want to do another coaching search. I certainly don't want to do a GM search on top of it. That's not very fun football to cover, but there is still a lot of pressure on this front office to get this thing right. And help Todd Monken actually be able to turn this thing around.
There is a lot of pressure. I mean, look, I've pointed this out now multiple times, this idea that when Jimmy Haslam was talking about why they decided to retain Andrew Berry this year, everything he listed off was basically stuff that had happened in the last 8 or 9 months. So I think like it just kind of highlights the NFL as a what have you done for me lately league. And that 2025 draft class is great, but in a few weeks, it's going to be about what can you get me in 2026? And the reality is, this front office has still never really been able to identify that young rookie receiver. And I do believe a part of that is because they went 3 years without having first round picks. But the reality is we just haven't seen them do it. They haven't found that Puka Nakua kind of guy in the later rounds, right? And they exist in the later rounds. And maybe if you're looking for reasons to be optimistic about Todd Monken, maybe he is a guy who can help them identify exactly what they are missing, what he needs in the offense he wants to run, and maybe they can turn the tide with that. But as you said, I mean, the issue is this isn't just about receivers or pass catchers. Like the O line, the situation it's in, that's another tough one. So they have a lot of work to do, and hopefully that his talent identifying skills are like taken seriously as they go through this draft process.
So, one other thing, just here as the dust has settled, I think this is really interesting today. So the Browns obviously end up hiring Todd Monken. There was a lot of talk about how desirable this job was. We've talked about it on this pod. Kevin Stefanski got hired very quickly. Jim Schwartz, if he leaves, is probably going to get a good job someplace else pretty quickly. Bubba Ventrone is getting requests. He got a request to go back to Pittsburgh, where he's from. Of course, Mary Kay, you wrote that it seems like he's likely to go back to the Rams. Their special teams are awful too. But people seem to be lining up for Bubba here all of a sudden. This presents a very, and I don't think it's as black and white as this, just because we've got to take into account talent level and all of that stuff. But this presents a very interesting dynamic where it's like, well, was it the Browns or was it Kevin Stefanski? Was it the Browns or was it Bubba Ventrone? Like, there's some interesting kind of comparisons we're going to be making over the next 365 days, I think.
Absolutely. Especially because we don't know exactly who's going to end up where yet. And I mean, Jim Schwartz, once again, might end up in San Francisco. Now that they've got a really good scheme and defense out there. So I think he would fit right in and be able to carry on the tradition of really good defenses there. But yeah, we're going to find out some things about what was going on here in Cleveland and how some of these people fare as they move forward. I mean, even when I look at Kevin Stefanski in Atlanta, I think that's a little bit of a shaky quarterback situation there too, because Michael Penix is coming off of an injury and you never know how that's going to go either. So um, it'll be very interesting. Now, one thing that I was thinking about is the fact that George Warhop, who was here from 2009 to 2013, he coached Joe Thomas during those years to great success. Maybe George will be able to talk Joel into coming back. Or maybe Joe Thomas will be able to convince Joel that working with George is going to be really good for him and that George will understand a veteran and what he needs and give him the rest that he needs and all those kinds of things. And that it will be a pleasant experience. So I've been in denial about Joel retiring.
Well,
I'm going to remain in denial.
We've talked about this. Like with Joel, it's been about like the personal stuff, right? Like that's a big part of his decision. Can't they just say to him, like, take Wednesdays off? Go drop the kids off at school on Wednesday. Heck, take Wednesday and Thursday off. We'll let you zoom in. You know, we trust you to study. We trust you to look at the iPad, all of that stuff. Come use the golf sim when you need to get out of the house.
Yes.
Come use the golf sim when you need to get out of the house and stop by an O-line meeting while you're here. You know, like let Joel just have one more year where he gets to do whatever he wants. I think he's earned that, right?
Yes. And I tried to tell Joel, because I've been through this myself. If you're not at work, you've got to be with those 3 kids all day long.
Being at home sucks.
And I'm just kidding. I adore my children. Absolutely adore my children. No, I was totally kidding with him. I was just trying to think of something that I could say to keep him from retiring because we just need him in that locker room, right? I mean, we have to have Joel in the locker room or I just don't know what we'll do.
All right. Is there anything else we've kind of been all over the place? Anything else we need to hit here on the Todd Monken hire? Obviously, we're going to talk about him all week, so I'm sure we'll have plenty to cover.
Well,
But
I mean, he's got to hire 3 coordinators
yeah,
potentially. And so I think that's significant. He's got to hire probably all 3 of them now, unless things can get patched up between the Browns and Joe.
or if they could promote somebody with like a Tarver or somebody like that from
Yes.
within, maybe they could
Yes.
do something like that. But
Yes.
yeah,
I've been writing
that's
that Ephraim Banda is possibly in line to be the coordinator, but we'll see. I mean, that's going to be Todd's call, really.
yeah. All right. Well, it'll be interesting. It's not done yet. Got coordinators, position coaches, all sorts of stuff to go here in this hiring process. But the big one is taken care of, and we appreciate the Browns taking care of it at 10:30 in the morning on a Wednesday, even though they made us wait a little longer than we all wanted to. Yeah, go ahead, Ashley. Oh, I know
Can
what
I
you're going to
say
say.
though? Yeah, because it was 10:30 on a Wednesday, but it was the day I was moving. And like, as I told you guys when I booked this, movers are coming 128. Surely that is when we will either A, have a decision or B, have a press conference. I, honest to God, assumed it was going to be a press conference. But when we didn't have anything last night at 11 o'clock, I'm like, yep, this is going to happen when the guys are here packing everything I own up. And sure enough, it did. But I did get to break the news to them. So that was my little silver lining.
Yeah, I got to break the Mike Tomlin news to my daughter's orthodontist. That was exciting. So there was a Steelers fan in the office who almost cried. She almost like broke down in tears when she found out. So it's always fun when you get to break the news to somebody like that. So there we go. All right. We are going to wrap this up here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. If you're not subscribed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen, go look for Orange and Brown Talk, get subscribed. Find us on YouTube, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Subscribe over there. There's a podcast tab. You can see most of our podcasts there on video as well. And of course, if you're not a Football Insider subscriber, we have been texting throughout the day. I am about to go write the newsletter that goes to our insider subscribers here that will go out tomorrow. So we're involved in that goes out every day. That's cleveland.com/Browns the Blue banner at the top of the page to get involved with that. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.